Hey robot makers! It's Raspberry Pi's 10th birthday on Monday the 28th of February, which is tomorrow. So let's celebrate by looking at 10 Raspberry Pi projects that you can build yourself. So let's dive straight in. My name's Kevin, come with me as we build robots, bring them to life with code, and have a whole load of fun along the way. So today's session is all about looking at 10 different projects you can build with Raspberry Pis. Some of them require extra stuff, extra components. Some of them you can build straight as is. So here's a couple of them that we'll be looking at. There's a Mac Mini, which is a really great project from Adafruit. It's one of the very first ones I actually created, and that one has the original Raspberry Pi in it as well. There's a thermal printer project. I was just holding up some of the printouts that this can do. We'll have a look at that one. There's the Trilobot that we did quite recently, which is a Raspberry Pi 4 based robot. You can put other Raspberry Pis in there, but why not use a 4? There's the Retro arcade machine. So looking at Retropi and Picade. There's the weather station. Build your own weather station with a Raspberry Pi. We'll also be looking at how to control a 3D printer with Octoprint. Some of you may be already using that, but it's something I've been using for quite a long time now. Clustered Pi, which is a project I created, just clustering a load of Raspberry Pis together, and why would we want to do that? Quad SMARS. So SMARS is one of my favourite robots, and you can put a Raspberry Pi Zero into a quad, so we'll be looking at that and why we would want to do that as well. What extra features can we get with a Raspberry Pi? We'll be looking at how to build your own AI. There's been a whole series that I've done. In fact, the most popular series on my channel is about how to build your own AI in Python. That's all based around a Raspberry Pi. And then finally, we'll be looking at the project I did most recently with the face detection using a companion robot, using the Trilobot. So let's dive straight into these. But before we do, let's just celebrate. Let's take a moment to think about the creation that is the Raspberry Pi and the fact that it's 10 years old. Can you believe that? I remember hearing about this through my uncle, who was he was getting into IT at the time, doing some courses, and he said, "Have you heard about Raspberry Pi?" And I hadn't at the time, and I was like, "What's this? I have to get one." And they were quite available at the time, so I got myself one of the original 256 meg Raspberry Pis. So I kind of went from there, and every time they bring out a new model, I'd be there putting my order in, getting at least one of them. So let's have a look. Why do we love the Raspberry Pi so much? So I think one of the main reasons is the price point. So normal computers can cost hundreds of dollars. So a Raspberry Pi is one of the very, very affordable computers that you can buy. I mean, it's that affordable that they gave it away on the front of a magazine. So the amazing Magpie magazine, which is the official magazine of Raspberry Pi, they gave away on the front of a subscription a Raspberry Pi Zero. So the fact that they can put this on the front of a magazine and include it as a free gift just says how affordable these are. It has an amazing community around it as well. It's got a really amazing community of teachers, of hobbyists, suppliers as well for all the different parts that go along with it, as well as the contributors, people who write code and share tutorials on how to write code on it. It's a really mature platform. It's been around for 10 years, and with that 10 years, you get that maturity of software, of learning resources and so on, and people just awareness. It's been around for that long and it's not going anywhere. It's only going to get bigger and better, and that platform means that it's a real foundation for people to work on. And there have been a load of other small single board computers that haven't quite made it. So the fact that Raspberry Pi is bigger than this, it's not just a computer, it's the community, it's everything. So it encourages that maker spirit, so you can build anything with a Raspberry Pi at its heart. Because it's a full Linux computer, you can do so much more. You can run multiple languages simultaneously, and it's portable, it's small, you can put a battery on it, you can lump it around, you can build things like robots with it. And it's very powerful. With it being a full Linux computer on a single board, you can do real work. I saw somebody in one of the forums recently when I was showing a picture of the clustered Pi I'd created, and they said, yeah, it's all good, but you can't do real work with it. And I thought, well, what do they mean by that? It's a full computer, of course you can. So that's one of there are a couple of reasons why I particularly love the Raspberry Pi so much. So I built this timeline for you. This is from launch to its 10th birthday. So let's have a look at some of the key points in the past 10 years. So 2012, the 26-pin Raspberry Pi B was released in February. So that's the birthday, which is tomorrow. And it's odd that they released B before the Model A. The Model B is considered the sort of big brother. It's got the full memory, it's got Ethernet, and it's got the full form factor. So models with 256 and 512 megs of memory were made available in that year. Then in 2013, the Model A was released. So that's the sort of slimmed down version, even cheaper. It has a variant which is the one without Ethernet and only 256 megs of memory. So that's the Model A. And also that year was the year that the camera, version 1 of the camera was released, both the infrared and the standard version. Then in 2014, we had the 40-pin, as we now know, the Raspberry Pi header was released as part of the Raspberry Pi B+, and also later on that year, the A+ was released, and both models came with 512 megs of memory. The following year, they don't miss a beat. Following year, the Raspberry Pi 2 was launched. So the 2B was released with 1 gig of RAM, which is quite a lot of memory, considering we'd only had a quarter of that and then half of that preceding it. The same year was the year that the Raspberry Pi Zero was released. That had 512 megs of RAM, and the official display was launched as well. I've got one of those on the back, just above. In fact, it's just there, I think. Just on top of my clustered Pi. So it's the 7-inch screen, and the Raspberry Pi can just fit onto the back. It's a really, really good quality display. So I must have had that for a number of years now, 2015, 7 years is that. So in 2016, the Raspberry Pi 3B was released with 1 gig of RAM. It had built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so that was one of the new features. You had Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. Up to that point, you had to have an official USB to Wi-Fi adapter. Version 2 of the camera was also released with both an infrared and a standard version in 2016. 2017, we had the Raspberry Pi Zero, which had Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi with the header, with little header pins available, still with 512 megs of RAM, but it had Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in, which was a really important step for the Raspberry Pi Zero. It kind of made it much more accessible and usable on remote devices, such as robots. So 2018, the Raspberry Pi 3 was launched, the 3A. That had 512 megs of memory. It had no Ethernet on board because it was the A model. Then they also released the B model, which had gigabit Ethernet, so a much faster Ethernet. Somebody commented on how I pronounce that, Ethernet. And it also had dual band Wi-Fi as well. 2019 saw the Raspberry Pi 4 released, the 4B, that had 1 gig, 2 gig and 4 gigs of memory. They've now dropped the 1 gig version, so that's now been discontinued, and we just have the 2, 4 and 8. The official keyboard and mouse was also released in that year, so I've got the official keyboard and mouse just on my desk over here. We can have a look at those as well. And in 2020 we had the Raspberry Pi 400 release, which is the all-in-one keyboard model, and that comes with a standard 4 gigs of memory. The Raspberry Pi 4B was also released with 8 gigs of memory in 2020, and the high-quality camera was also released. So that's like got an extra add-on frame where you can put proper lenses on there and you get a much higher quality image. So in 2021, last year, we had the Raspberry Pi Zero 2W released. Still had 512 megs of memory, to some people's complaints. That it is what it is to keep the price down. The Raspberry Pi Pico was also launched last January in 2021, which is a microcontroller, and that has the RP2040 chip, which is now everywhere. Everybody's picked up on this as being a really capable and affordable chip. And 2022, what do we expect this year? So other than the Raspberry Pi operating system being released as a 64-bit, we've not seen any new hardware yet. One of the challenges at the moment is the supply chain and manufacturing of chips is really limited. Some of the companies who make the substrate, there's only a couple of those in the world, and they've had some issues. So that, along with other things like the pandemic, have caused some constraints there, but I'm sure we'll see some extra products very shortly this year. So that's the timeline. But wait a minute, Kevin, what about the official Lego hat, the case, the mug, the pen, and the Sense hat? I also tried to find when the official launch date of the power supply. There is an official Raspberry Pi power supply, and I couldn't find the date of when they actually released that. So let's have a look when these other things were released. So we had the Sense hat, which I think I've got on my desk here. The Sense hat is a little hat, as they call them. So it's a little component that you can fit onto the 40-pin header. And this has a whole bunch of sensors, got an LED array, it's got a little joystick, accelerometer, and so on. The case was also released in 2015, so I've got, I don't know which version of this, I've got part of one here. I tended to buy them in the case for a while, but now I put them into clusters and so on, so I've got a drawer full of cases. We also had the official mug in 2018. Alex is just drinking that in the background. Let's see if we can see Alex holding up the mug there. That's my favourite go-to beverage container. So definitely make sure I have one of those. And then in 2021 we also had the pen and notepad, so I also have a set of those two just in front of me here. So a nice clickable pen with the logo on there, and also a nice sort of imprinted, embossed notepad as well. It has a lovely sort of Raspberry Pi colours representing as well today, of course. I didn't put when the t-shirts were made available, I can't remember when they came out. But yeah, there's the timeline. And the Lego hat, I can't remember where I put that. I've got one of those, and it's to connect up the Lego Mindstorm robot kits to the Raspberry Pi with Python libraries as well. So if you like what I do, make sure you give this video a like. Drop me a comment as well to let me know what you think about this, whether you've got a Raspberry Pi yourself, whether you intend to get one, when you can get hold of them. And also consider subscribing as well if you also like this and you want to see more. Okay, so the first project that you can make, project number 1, is the Mini Mac Classic. So this is on the Adafruit learning system, which I've commented about this week as being the best world-class learning system that there is for building bits and bobs electronic things and making stuff. So this was designed for the original Raspberry Pi B. It's a 3D printed case. It has a TFT display, a 320 by 240, which doesn't sound a great deal, but it's enough. Touchscreen display, and it magnetically attaches. So I've got one over here on the desk. Let me see if I can get a picture of this. So this is it here. You can see if I bring it over to the overhead camera. This is what it looks like. I've got the terminal running on it there, so RPI Mac, and you can see from the top there, that's the original Raspberry Pi Model B, because it has the what do you call it, the video connector, composite video connector. It's also got like a keyboard thing, the USB and the Ethernet. And on the other side, look at the size of the memory card that's on there as well. It's got a very chunky memory card. What I like about this, if I disconnect the power, sorry, Raspberry Pi, and then I pull the front off, let's see if I can do this without making the whole thing break apart. It's magnetically attached, so they're little neon rare earth batteries. What am I talking about? Neodymium even magnets embedded within the frame, and that just gives it that sort of connectability. If I just put that in there we go, and we can plug the power back in and have this boot up. So we'll just power that back up. Get the power plug in. There we go, and that'll start to boot up in a second. Let's leave that on there. We can come back to that in a second. So that's the first project that I built. So I've actually got on the desk here one of the original Raspberry Pis. This may be the very first one I have. So on there it says Raspberry Pi 2011. And you can see there it's got the composite video connector on the top. It has the huge SD card thing on the back. And you can see it's only got the 24 pins on the top there rather than the 40 that we're used to. And the power is on which side? There it is. It's on that side just there next to the SD card. Also has the display adapter and also the camera adapter as well. So the display adapter can be used to connect other displays as well. So I can just show you now that's it's booted up quite nicely, and it's now just flashing there. I've got a keyboard connected to that I can plug in and issue commands and so on. I think it's running the latest version of the 32-bit version of Raspberry Pi OS as well. So what can we say about this? Really easy project to make. I printed it on my 3D printer, and this is before I had a really good quality 3D printer, so the front of it looks a little bit gnarly. Screws together quite nicely. I think it was just difficult getting hold of the neodymium magnets, but that's a really nice touch to make the whole thing sort of click together. I don't think I put the speaker inside as well, so it hasn't got the audio but everything else apart from that works fine. And the idea behind this is that you can run VMAC, which is a classic System 7, I think it goes up to System 7 emulator for the Raspberry Pi, and you can emulate applications for the Macintosh. The screen is a bit limited because the original Macintosh, which I have one of the behind me just there, that's a Mac SE, that had 512 by 512. That doesn't sound right. 512 by something display. I'm sure it's 512 by 512, but that would make it square, and it's not a square display. It's 512 by something anyway. And this, you can see, is 320 by 240, so it's not quite the same width, and therefore you've got kind of a searching window that goes around as you move your mouse. But it's a really nice project. It's nice to have that on your desk, and I usually just have that sort of connected up as a quick terminal, and I can throw a keyboard on there and do stuff. It did require a special script to be run, and Adafruit is still maintaining that, hence being able to use it recently. And that script installs some frame buffer stuff so you can connect to this, and it just uses that 26 pins to connect, I think probably over SPI, to give it some video display. So if you want to check out more about that, it's on learn.adafruit.com/mini-mac-pi, and you can see for yourself if that's something you'd like to try. So next up, turn this down a bit. So next up is the thermal printer project. Hey robot makers, do you want to make your own thermal printer that's wireless and that you can print from any device like your phone or your Mac or your PC? Then watch this video. Looks very green. So yeah, I sped this up a little bit because, as you'll see in a second when I print something out, it can be a bit slow. But it's decent quality images. Here's one of the Picade that I printed earlier. You can see all the gubbins inside there. This is a Raspberry Pi Zero inside, without Wi-Fi. I would recommend the Wi-Fi. There we go, I think that's ending now. That was a little clip I did for, clip, is that what you call them? A little clip I did for Instagram and Twitter. And probably a YouTube short as well. So I bought a box full of thermal paper for this little project. Really like this project. This is one of my favourite ones. So let's actually have this print something out. So this is on. Every now and again that LED will flash telling me that it's connected up. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect it to my phone, and I'm going to print an image from my phone. Let's see if I can get it to do this. Let's find a decent image to print. What I'll do, I'll print. Well, that's a video. Let's not try that. Let's try Badger 2040. So I'm just going to go to my phone. I've selected an image. I'm going to press print, and then it's going to find on my print settings the ZJ58 because it's an AirPrint printer. It can be found by the Raspberry Pi. Now I've not told it to limit down the size of this, so what it will probably do in this case is print like a long strip, a bit like this one. It prints, imagine there's like an A4 sheet and you've just cut out a small 58 millimeter strip. That's what it's going to do. I can make it print down the whole thing so it fits on one page. I did have one of those to hand before, but I've lost it. It does take a little bit of while to shunt all that data across to the Raspberry Pi and then have it convert that image to grayscale, scale it down for the printer, but it will print out in a couple of seconds time, and I'll hear it making this sort of sound that it makes. So for this project, you need a standard mini thermal printer. You can get hold of these. They're about £40, I think. There we go, it's now printing out. They're about £40 to buy, and you need some kind of Raspberry Pi. I'd go for the Raspberry Pi Zero with header, with Wi-Fi as well, possible. And that means it's a lot easier to connect. See there's the Badger printing out. This is why I sped it up a little bit. It's not massively slow, but it's also not fast. There we go. That's quite a good example with it being a black and white image to begin with anyway. Obviously you need an SD card to run the operating system from. You need a USB-A connector. So what I've got, once this is finished printing out, I'll show you some of my workings out. And a USB cable. So what you do is you just tear that off once you've printed it. And there we go, we've got a nice picture of the Badger RP2040 there, printed out on my thermal paper. This has got a sort of yellow tint to it. I'll sort of show you the back. You can see That's white and that's sort of yellow. You can get different colours of paper. And this lasts quite a long time. With it being thermal, over time that will just all turn to a sort of greyish colour, but for now it's quite sharp. It does tend to curl up and try to return to its curled state, so if you want to put these in a frame or something, I consider these a bit like Polaroid. You can take a picture that, you know, it's not like a masterpiece. There you go, there's another one I did earlier, which is of the Picade, and that's a full picture rendered on a tiny piece of paper. So you can see on the back there I have the USB connector, and there is 4 screws to this project box. I've not 3D printed an enclosure for this, but you could do if you wanted to make this look a bit prettier. What else is there to say about this? One of the challenges is power, so it does take quite a bit of ampage with it being heat based. So one of the issues I found is if you try and run this from the Raspberry Pi itself, you'll probably end up just cooking your Raspberry Pi. So you need a separate power supply, two sets of power going in. And if you've got one brick that they both plug into, you need to make sure it can deliver, you know, maybe about 4 amps or something like that. 2 for the Raspberry Pi and 2 for the printer itself. And thermal paper is really cheap. You can get hold of that really easily. It's used everywhere in like till receipt printers. Restaurants use them, all that kind of stuff. And there's a whole built-in library as well. It works over serial, so it's very easy to get the drivers up and running. And Adafruit have done a great job of putting together a list of what drivers you need. Things like the Unix printing cups, whatever that stands for, something Unix printing, common Unix printing system, and that can mean that you can then make this available over AirPrint, so you can print from things like your mobile phone. So you can see there that worked quite nicely. It's just a little bit slow, but it's a really great project, not massively expensive. The thermal printer is probably the most expensive bit of this. You could probably even get one secondhand on eBay as well. Okay, let's go to the next project. Oh, sorry, this is the gubbins of it. This is quality, what would you call that, glue gun work that I did. So there in the bottom is the Raspberry Pi Zero. This one doesn't have Wi-Fi, so it's got a little dongle just going off there with the official Raspberry Pi Wi-Fi connected to that. And then the other one just goes out of the box, and that's just the power. And then you can see there, this blue cable is the thing that's going into the USB connector, and that's essentially just providing power. So there's like a red and a black 5-volt line going into the printer, and that's it. There's just a couple of, we have a data signal, and like a receive and transmit, and there's also a ground there as well. So it's very, very simple to actually electronically set up. Great project. So the next is the Trilobot. So this is another one of my favorite projects. I've got a Trilobot just here next to me, and I've been doing quite a bit of work on this one. My most recent piece of project work is putting a microphone on this so that it can do voice recognition, speech synthesis, and also face detection using the camera on the front. So this is like an optional extra, just a little desk microphone that I put some Velcro pads on so I can stick that on there. It looks like one of those weird fish things that dangles the thing about. So let's talk about this project. Let's get that on the desk there. So the Trilobot, I've done quite a few videos on the Trilobot. What we can say about this is it's very affordable. I think it's about £48, something like that, from Pimeroni. Purchase this. It's got really great moon buggy tyres. It's powered by a Raspberry Pi, so you can put a Raspberry Pi 2, 3, 4 in there. I've gone for a Raspberry Pi 4 when I've been able to get hold of them, and they just seem to be stock hitting the supply chain now. So I was able to get hold of a Raspberry Pi 4 2GB version. This is unopened at the moment for a project that I've got coming up, and I think that's what's actually in this one as we speak. I managed to get hold of the battery as well, which is the official battery that they recommend from this, because they gave it to me. And I've also got a number of extra breakout board connectors. So this one has got the thermal camera on there. I've been playing about with that this weekend. It's really, really fun. You can see the heat of all the different things in your room just by looking at that little camera. So I'll be sure to do a video on that at some point. Also has a rangefinder on board, so all the Trilobots have the rangefinder, so you can do some really great projects with that, detecting distance. You can do like a follow object. You can have a void object where if something comes within a certain distance, you get it to reverse back. You can also, underneath there is a whole range of LEDs. So there's 6 LEDs underneath that light up. I did a video on all the fun that you can have with that. And most recently, the face recognition one, which we'll get to shortly, that was able to change the colours depending whether it detected a face or not. The onboard camera, therefore, means we could do all kinds of clever stuff with OpenCV and AI. And this means that this is a really great platform for developing your projects, your robotic projects with. So I love the Trilobot. Very easy to get started with that. The kit is really great quality, really good quality, really great to build. Probably only about an hour to put together. So on board it has 4 tactile buttons with LED statuses. So just at the back, you can see there's these little white things. These are the buttons, and they have an LED next to them that you can program to light up when you press the button or show a particular status. It has a front-facing ultrasonic distance sensor and camera mount. So the camera is sold separately. You can buy the camera as a separate item. So I've got hold of this is a camera module version 2, which we saw in the timeline earlier. So this is great. Plugs straight into the CSI slot on the Raspberry Pi. That means we can do all kinds of camera, face recognition, or just taking pictures and video. It's hackable headers for expansion. So there's a servo header. There are 5 headers for mounting the breakout garden items. So I've got a number of breakout gardens. I've got the OLED display. I've got a number of those. And I can't find where I put the other one, but I've also got a number of other bits and bobs, which are, oh, there you go. Got the accelerometer one as well. So the accelerometer one means that we can detect what orientation the robot is and whether it's facing north and so on. And it has one I2C header as well, if you want to use that to add extra stuff to it. It has the 6-zone RGB underlighting as well, and it has 2 Quest, I've been told these are pronounced, connectors, which I know Adafruit use quite a lot as well. So if you've got something that uses Quest, you can go for it with that. And there's a whole bunch of schematics, mechanical drawings, a full Python library, and amazing documentation on Pimoroni's website as well. And yeah, it's 2-wheel front drive, and it has a caster on the back. So it just has a little metal ball bearing on the back, which sits nicely on the floor, and the wheels. Powered by the N20 motors that are in there, similar to what we use on the SMARS robot. Then they're 110 RPM. So that's that one. Next up we have the retro arcade machine. So Pimoroni also developed a Picade. I think this is the 2nd generation of their arcade machine. This is a load of fun. So this is powered by a Raspberry Pi. I've got a Raspberry Pi 4 in the one I've got. I think it can run on earlier ones, but for emulation you probably want a faster processor that you can get hold of. So as much memory and as a faster processor version Raspberry Pi you can find. So it runs on Retropi, which is a collection of retro game emulators, retro game and computer emulators, and it brings all the fun of the arcade to your home. It has a really good authentic joystick and control buttons. There's even a mod to make the buttons light up as well, and it has a really vibrant screen as well. So we can actually switch this on. If you want me to go and just wheel back there, I can give you a bit of a demo of this quickly. Just grab hold of it. See if I can do this without tearing the world apart. So let me go over to host for a second. So you can see the size of it. It's quite chunky. It has a power button on the side there. When I press that, if I press that correctly, there we go. It's going to fire up the Raspberry Pi that's inside, and we'll see all this sort of text and everything. I can see the little welcome to Raspbian showing on there, and then it'll boot straight into Retropi, which is what's installed on here. And you'll hear when I select a game just how loud this is. I haven't figured out how to make this quiet yet, so any tips from the Pimoroni guys will be well received on that. So the enclosure is really nice. You've got a number of buttons on this. There's 2 either side, left and right, like pinball type controls, and then on the front you've got another 2. And then this is the main menu. So let me just come back out of that. Restart the emulation station. I think I must have pressed something there and it made it quit. And it's running emulation station, as you can see there. So love this controller. So let's go for Sonic the Hedgehog. So that's Mega Drive. So we'll hit one of the control buttons there. Let's select Sonic the Hedgehog. There we go. So it's just launching that now. Sega! I'm sure you can hear that. And what it'll do, it'll just launch into a demo of the game now, I think. So the screen is really bright. If I hit that there, we can make it start a proper game. I'll turn it off in a second. There we go. Let's get this better on shot. There we go. If you just hit all the keys, you can then close the content and get it to go back to the menu. So this has got a whole bunch of games installed on it. We've got like a ZX Spectrum emulator on there as well. I found some quite cool games that were on there. How do I go back? Is it that one? Not used this for a while, so bear with me. I think I've tried to launch a game there. Nope, let's go back. And then to turn this off, we can just hit the button again and it'll just power it straight off. So it's a nice soft button there. So I love the Picade, really easy to put together. Just take a little bit of time to put together. I did a video on this a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was about a 3-hour live stream of me putting the whole thing together. And at the end of the live stream, I don't think I actually had it running because I hadn't plugged the video connector wire in properly, but as you can see, that's running perfectly. So that's a really great project. It's a little bit pricey, but it's definitely worth it because it's a high quality item. So the screen is razor sharp. It looks like an iPad screen, really high quality. The joystick feels like it can really take some arcade usage, as with the buttons as well. I think all I need to do is just get more games for it and have more of a play. So yeah, powered by Raspberry Pi, runs Retropi, authentic controls, really vibrant screen, loads of fun. Definitely recommend that. So that's available from Pimeroni. I always say Pimeroni and I get told off by John every single time. It's P as in pin, pitch, Pimeroni. No, P, pitch, Pimeroni. Not P, but Pimeroni. Pimeroni. I think that's about as close as I'm going to get. Pimeroni. I need to keep saying that. So Pimeroni also have a weather sensor, which is weather hat. So if you want to build a weather station, this is a really easy way to get started. There are other hats as well that you can get started with. I mean, there is the official Sense hat from Raspberry Pi organization. However, the weather hat is designed for a weather station. In fact, you can order this with the weather sensors. So you can see on the screen there, you've got the weather vane. You have the I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. The thing that spins around with the little cups that tells you how fast the wind speed is. Anemometer. How do you pronounce that? Anemometer. So I have one for my drone, which is very similar. So it just measures the wind speed. There's also a rain detector on there, so that's what that sort of box shape is. It collects rain. It has like a little seesaw mechanism in there. That's that little cup, a little thimble that fills up with rain, and as it gets heavier and heavier, it then tips out, and that's 1 unit of rain. And it knows exactly how many millimeters are in that, and over time you can figure out therefore how much rainfall has fallen. It also has a temperature sensor, pressure sensor, humidity sensor, as well as light, rain and wind. So the whole works are in there. I've also powered the Raspberry Pi. Not powered. I also have some other sensors connected to this, and I wanted to show you these today. So what I want to just bring up is my Grafana setup. I'm just going to very quickly show you the extra thing that I managed to get working on here. Just using Node-RED actually. Let's go to Node-RED as well. I'm just going to fire this up and then show you it. So that's 180. Right. I'll show you the data first, and then I'll show you how that works behind the scenes. So if I go over here, so this is my weather station in Grafana. So I can see things like the pressure. So if I go into, that was the last 5 minutes, let's go for the last 12 hours. You can see there that pressure has fallen. That usually indicates some kind of storm is on the way. We can see the wind speed. It's not very windy at the moment. We can see there's been a tiny bit of rain detected by the sensor. And you can see all the various different temperatures as well. Now the light levels were originally the light levels on the Raspberry Pi hat. But the hat is in the back of the room, so just over there, next to Alex, that is the Raspberry Pi hat. Yeah, it's all right. And that is what's taking all the light readings and, excuse me, and the temperature readings. Now that's great if you want to know what light levels are in this room that we're in and what the temperature is in this room, but we want to know the outside temperature and the outside light levels. So I have some Philips Hue motion sensors, and what I was able to do using Node-RED is there is a plugin that's called Hue Magic. I think that's what it's called. If I go to the Manage Palette, there we go, Hue Magic. So I've got the Node-RED contrib library, which is Hue Magic, and this has got a whole bunch of extra nodes that you can look at. So you can connect a bridge, you can look at brightness, which is the lux level of the sensor. So as well as detecting motion, it also has like a temperature, humidity, pressure, and light level as well. So the light level is obviously, if the light level goes below a certain point, it can turn the light on that it's connected to. And you've got a whole other things like motion as well, temperature, and so on. So what I was able to do with this node is say, and we have one on the front door, we've got one on the back door, we have one on the summer house, the robot lab. So we take the current temperature in Celsius and the current light level. So it says it's quite dark. It does look dark out there at the moment. It's 4 lux. And as well as adding it to the debug payload, so we can just see that the traffic is coming through. If we just go to that little debug, we can see there's some... it's 4 degrees outside, and it's also 4 lux light level, which is very, very low. So I've added to that a location, just calling front door. You then just add it as an extra, as an array, so that if you do it like this, where you've got the payload that's got the data in it, and you add to that the location as a separate array, it will then tag it. So when you put that into influx, which is what I've got it running into here, it can then be sorted by that. So in Grafana, if I go back there and I look at this little sensor down here, let's view it. See the light levels have dropped and dropped and dropped. So that's the peak, the middle of the day, and then you can see as dusk has set in, it's fallen away from about 3:30 onwards. So if we edit this and have a look behind the scenes, we can see there's a location, and the location is front door. Front door is the tag, it's that second part of the array that we put in there. And the field that we're looking at is lux. So that's how we build that out. So what I was able to do is build up my weather station using additional sensors that I already had around the house by using Node-RED to bring in that extra data to the one platform, to the one dashboard. So really pleased with how that sort of turned out. So weather stations, really, really good fun, and you can build your own sensor. You can bring your own data in there. You don't have to use a hat like this. It's just the easiest way, I would say. So we did a whole video on the weather hat. Go and check out that. I think they're still in stock at the moment at Pimoroni. Go and check that out. So it's a combination of technologies. So there is a Python library which runs on the weather hat on the Raspberry Pi, connects to the weather hat sensors, brings all that data in. I wrote a little program that then sends that data to an MQTT broker, Mosquito, which is running in a Docker container. That then is picked up by Node-RED. It can take data in from the MQTT broker, see all these different things, do something with it. And the thing I did with it is send that to an influx database, also running on a Docker container. And then that gets sent to Grafana, which we've just seen as the dashboard. And because it's time-based, time series data, we can very quickly slice and dice that by time periods, like what was it like in the last hour, and immediately you've got that set of data back. Love this project. So this is one of the things a lot of people do with Raspberry Pis. So there you go. It's got a 1.54 inch LCD display, colour screen, 4 programmable buttons again, a bit like the Trilobot. A whole bunch of onboard sensors via that BME 280 chip. So you've got pressure, temperature, humidity, and it has those RJ11 connectors for wind and rain as well. And works with any Raspberry Pi that has a 40-pin header. So this one isn't running on a Raspberry Pi 4, this one's running on a Raspberry Pi 1.2, I think it is, or a 2. It's running on quite an old one, but it's good enough for what we need. And you can see on this little video clip that I did, this was my first attempt at mounting it on a pole, and you can see that it's kind of pivoting because the pole isn't long enough. And I hadn't read the instructions that said you should connect it to another pole. So this little video clip here shows you it's connected to a larger pole using those Jubilee clips. You can see the anemometer spinning around there, and that's properly connected up and 100% plumb. So you can see in a second, I'm stood next to it with my phone, and the green screen there means that it's at 0. It's completely vertical. So yeah, send your data to the cloud. So that's a really great project. So moving on to the next one, this is about controlling a 3D printer. So I've got 2 3D printers in the room. If I go to that shot there, you can probably see I've got one here and one over here. And those 3D printers both have a Raspberry Pi, which is running Octoprint. Now I have actually got both of those connected to a smart plug, so I can operate from my phone. I can turn the 3D printers on just by hitting a button on the smartphone, and they'll sort of whiz into life. Octoprint will then load up on the Raspberry Pi, and it means I've then got a nice web interface. I can drag and drop the projects that I've been working, the G code that's been created by Cura for a 3D print, drag that over to the Raspberry Pi, and then it's running on a Raspberry Pi that's dedicated to it. So I don't need my laptop switched on all the time. You've just got this very low power Raspberry Pi connected, just monitoring the status, checking the temperature, making sure it doesn't have things like thermal runaway. It can switch off the printer or reboot it if there's any issues. So really, really easy project to get going. As it says there, it allows you to control your 3D printer. So if you're doing things like bed leveling, really easy to do if you have a Raspberry Pi running Octoprint. Octopi is the purpose-built SD card that you can download pre-configured. And really, it's just running a Python script. So everything that you see on Octoprint is actually just Python. It's got a really extensive plugin collection as well for enhancements. There's loads of extra things like bed level visualization modules. And you can see things like the status, the current percentage, what the current temperature is, how much filament it's used, all that kind of stuff. So I absolutely love that. Very easy, and it's free. It's, as all the best software seems to be, it's free software as well. So Clustered Pi. This is a project I did most recently, and this is about, for me, learning how clusters work. So I've been using very cheap Raspberry Pi Zeros, a whole bunch of them. There's 12 in the cluster, and I've been using it to do things like learn Grafana. So the weather station was a result of the Clustered Pi. I'd learned how to containerize software using Docker. I'd learned how to manage those Docker containers using Portainer, which is a really great piece of software for managing containers. I'd learned how to store data in Influx database. So there's an Influx database running on that cluster as well. And also host and generate websites using Jekyll. So I did a video about this quite recently, about how to build using Markdown, using Jekyll in a Docker container to automatically build a website out and then host it. And I was actually running this on my servers kind of raw, so people were hitting my home IP address when they connected to clustered-pi.com. However, I now use Cloudflare because that gives you a bit of denial of service protection. And I know Jeff Geerling has been having some issues with people hitting his Dramble Pi cluster sort of maliciously, trying to take it down, but Cloudflare takes that away, stops that being a problem. So yeah, I was able to also run my own Python Flask-based projects on the cluster, and also run Node-RED, which we've just seen as well. So that's all running on the Clustered Pi. And that's just on the desk behind me as well. I think it's just out of the way if I move that. Grab this little camera, spin it round. And then there we go. There's my little Clustered Pi. It's not currently powered up. I think it's only got one power going to it at the moment as well. So that's just behind the Picade there behind me. So for me, this was a really great project. It also enabled me to flex my 3D design and 3D printing skills. So I designed this in Fusion 360, printed it out on both the printers. One had white, and I think they still got the white filament and the yellow filament in from that print. And just printing out 12 modules, all exactly the same, and have them just push fit together. No screws required other than the screws to fit into the Raspberry Pis to the module. So very, very simple to do. Really enjoyed that as a project. I've still got some prototype bits and pieces on my desk, such as these little slices that are the base plate the white bit connects into, and some of the seats as well. I think this is the earlier seat design that I did. The new ones have got a little notch cut out of them, so they sort of pressure fit everything together. So I'm intending to take this with me next week to the Raspberry Pi exhibition. They're launching a new exhibition at the National Museum of Computing down in Milton Keynes / Bletchley Park. So I'll be there representing the Kev's robots, and I'm going to try and take this along in a container and then have it sat on the on the crate that it's based upon, the green crate that they have there. So really great project, very easy to do. All the files, if you want to download them, you go to cluster-pi.com and you can grab the STLs, print it out yourself. If you just happen to have 12 Raspberry Pi Zeros knocking about, which I'm sure everybody has. So if you like what I do and you want to help support the show, you can go over to buymeacoffee.com/KevMcAleer. You can buy me a coffee. Or if you don't want to do that, you can go over to the YouTube membership if you're watching this on YouTube and click the join button. I think it's only about $3 per month. And it makes all the difference to me. Everyone that does that means I can do this a little bit easier, because there is quite a bit of stuff to pay for. Not only just Raspberry Pis themselves, but all the equipment and software that it takes to produce a show like this. So I do go live every single Sunday, 7 o'clock GMT. Been consistently going live every single Sunday at 7 o'clock GMT for almost 2 years now. So takes quite a bit of commitment to do that, but I love what I do. So you'll always see me there at 7 o'clock. So the next project, I think we're nearly done now. I think this is the second to last one. This is how to build your own AI. So this has been the most popular series on my YouTube channel to date. This has got by far the most number of views. So for this, we just need a Raspberry Pi, any Raspberry Pi, and we can use this to build our own artificial intelligent assistant. So we can create some code that will listen to commands. We can either do that on device or we can use the Google Voice service. I think I've used the Google Voice service just for speed, and it's quite accurate as well. They've obviously put a lot of money into this. You can have it say responses back using voice synthesis. Again, these are all things that you can do using Python, and it's probably easier than you think. That was the takeaway from this. That's probably why it's been so popular, because everybody thinks, I want to build my own Jarvis, I want to build my own, Amazon voice assistant's name I'm not going to mention. And you can do that. And you can create a whole bunch of skills so that you can make this even more useful. So I think we have a calendar skill, we have a list skill, a jokes skill. Don't think I ever got around to the insult skill, but there's a whole bunch of them. And I do intend to have that built out with even more skills as well, connecting to things like the weather station that we have. So I've got a project in mind for this that involves building a small robot as well. So the initial idea for that was, we started with a sketch. We want to build our own AI, so things like home automation skills, speech recognition, speech synthesis skills, some kind of API to connect to things like weather, stocks, news, calendar, to-dos, a web interface. We haven't built that yet, and we can build that out using Flask, Markdown, Jekyll, and something called Beautiful Soup, which is a really nice framework for grabbing, screen scraping data from other websites. And we had some other fun skills as well, such as the jokes and the insults. So we did get it to do jokes. There's a Python module called PyJokes that enables you to just get a piece of text, a one-liner, or a more elaborate joke, and it can speak that to you on command. So what I want to do with my Trilobot is extend this out so that it has the speech recognition built in just by a USB microphone being added to it. And that means that it can listen to a voice command through the microphone, and then it can act upon it. So I want to be able to say, go forward, and it'll go forward. Should be quite straightforward to do that, but I've not got round to that one yet. That's one of the next projects. So if you want to do this, this is a really easy one. You don't need any extra bits and bobs for this other than just a computer, a Raspberry Pi. I mean, you could actually do this without a Raspberry Pi, but I've done this designed for a Raspberry Pi so that you can add it to your robots. And in fact, the last project, which is the SMARS quad robot, this is where I actually designed some of the software to run on. So this was running on a Raspberry Pi Zero, I think the Zero WH, so it has the header and it has Wi-Fi. And as well as being a walking robot, let me just grab this little guy. It has the official Raspberry Pi camera on board. It's powered by a Raspberry Pi Zero. I don't want it to tip out there. I've not got the battery connected up to this at the moment, but this is a fully articulated robot, quad robot, a SMARS quad robot. If you want to build one of these, go to smarsfan.com. All the instructions are on there. It has 8 SG90 servos in there, the little blue ones, very, very affordable. And it also has a PCA 9685 board to connect up all the different servos on the back and present that to the Raspberry Pi through just 3 wires. So these 3 wires here, voltage, neutral, oh sorry, 4 wires, voltage neutral, and then there's I think a data pin and clock pin. So I think it's I2C. So very, very straightforward to connect that up to your Raspberry Pi. And then we've got the power of Python then to be able to move this around, behave in various different ways, and do things like face recognition, do things like voice recognition and voice synthesis back. So you can talk to your spider robot, you can tell it to do various things, it can see you, it can walk towards you, all that kind of good stuff. So that's what I want to do as my next project, is to get this so that it can hear my voice. That's going to be, I'll be using the Trilobot to try out some of these pieces of code on first, because a Raspberry Pi 4 is a little bit faster than a Raspberry Pi 2, even the Raspberry Pi 0 2 is what I'm trying to say. So yes, face recognition, that's one I did on the Trilobot. There's a face detection on your Trilobot, and I think that's actually the next project. But before we get to that, yes, the Python text-to-speech was part of this SMARS quad robot. Very, very simple to get this up and running. So Python text-to-speech 3 is just Pi TTSX3, and Pi Audio enable you to have everything you need, as well as eSpeak, which is another kind of a wrapper module for speech synthesis and speech recognition. And then all you need to do is import that Python text-to-speech, create an engine, initialize the engine, and then just say whatever the text is, and then run wait. And it will just speak that speech. And that's what we did with the jokes one. We just get a joke one-liner and we say whatever the one-liner is that it returns. Very, very simple to get these up and running. And then the last project is face detection. So if you have the Raspberry Pi, where have I put the camera module, which I've got one of in here. If you've got one of these camera modules, let's have a look at what this looks like in here. Let's go full screen for this. So this is the official version 2 Raspberry Pi camera module. It comes with a nice long cable on there. You see there, 2.1 Raspberry Pi. It's got the little screen protector on it. And this cable, this ribbon cable, you can actually remove that and put the shorter one on for the Raspberry Pi 0. Or if you want to use this on a 3D printer, you can get like a 2 meter long one as well. You also get this little tool, which you can use to sort of turn and adjust the focus on the camera module, because it's a fixed focus, but you can get it to change that fix ever so slightly. So if you have one of them connected up to your Raspberry Pi 0 or Raspberry Pi 4 or whichever Raspberry Pi you've got, you can then do face detection with that using OpenCV. So OpenCV is Open Computer Vision. Very, very simple to get that up and running. I've done quite a few videos on how to do that in Python. And most recently I added that to the Trilobot so that if it detected a face, it could change the under LEDs from, was it blue to green? Green is saying detected face, blue means it hasn't detected one, and you can even get it like to turn to red if there's 2 or more faces detected in an image. So really, really great, and quite a fun interactive project to do, and it's reasonably real time. Not as fast as like a Jetson Nano, but certainly quite quick to do. So really easy and fun project to do with your Raspberry Pi. Okay, so if you want to join me on Discord, we also have a new Discord server. We've got quite a few people active on there now. So if you want to join the Discord, just head over to the URL, which is action.smarsfan.com/join-discord. And there's a little sign-up form there. Just put your email address in, and then it just means we can keep up the riffraff and we can keep it fun and on topic to robotics as well. So it says demo. I think we've been through pretty much all the bits and pieces that I wanted to show you today. Just looking around to see if there's anything else I wanted to show off. But no, I think that's pretty much it from the projects that we wanted to cover off. And it all started here with the Raspberry Pi, the original Raspberry Pi 26-pin with the composite video out. I've even got a composite video monitor in one of my little drawers. It's a tiny little reversing camera display. I think I got on eBay for about £12. And that has composite video on it, and I was able to make a really small computer terminal based upon this. And this did have HDMI out, the very first one had that as well. Cool, so if you're watching this on replay, this is the point in the video where I'll say goodbye. And for people who are watching this live now, we can go to a Q&A and chat and see what people have been talking about.